Hello, yes, I'm still sick, but the news just keeps on coming, so I got some stuff to talk about. Last night on Weekly MTG, Gavin Verhey, Aaron Forsyth, and Blake Rasmussen sat down to talk about the changes to Commander and how Commander is now being controlled by Wizards of the Coast, with the Rules Committee taking on an advisory role as opposed to being the governing body for the format. If I'm completely honest with you, I think this stream was actually a kind of breath of fresh air. It was pretty relieving considering some of the fears that some of us had. I'm going to unpack that and talk primarily about the new bracket system and how after hearing Gavin and Aaron talk about it, I'm actually way more on board. I think that actually this might be the best possible outcome we're getting from a unfortunately very bad lead up and scenario. You can buy your cards from coolstuffinc.com, use the link in the description below, the code Kenobi at checkout, get 5% off your order and it helps to support the show. To get you all up to speed, the Rules Committee has passed off complete control of the format to Wizards of the Coast and took on an advisory role simply because they didn't have the tools to deal with the sheer amount of hate, animosity and threats they were getting over the previous bans that happened last week. You can check out my video from yesterday where I talk quite candidly about how disappointing all of this really is and how much it makes us look like fucking dickheads. If you or friends around you or people you know online were being quite literally throwing harassment at people like Olivia Gerber-Hicks, or Jim LePage from the Spike Feeders, members of the Rules Committee, then that's not okay. And you should call out your friends and other people about that and ask them to adjust their shitty behavior to, well, just not be shitty. But that's not what this video is about. My biggest fear immediately with Wizards taking over the ban list is that it's no longer adjudicated by a third party, that third party not being, you know, a beholden to the shareholders and the profit drive of Wizards of the Coast and Papa Hasbro. Aaron Forsyth spoke directly to this by saying that actually, yes, he does have bosses who have demands, but ultimately he has a lot of freedom. By the way, Aaron Forsyth, I think, is the vice president of Wizards. I'm very warm. I'm taking my hoodie off. That's right, I'm stripping on YouTube. Hopefully no skin was shown there. But Aaron Forsyth spoke explicitly about how he has a lot of freedom, and ultimately one of the big things that they have to do holistically is look to make things last forever. They don't want to do anything to piss off the community enough that will damage said community and reduce the amount of people that are actually playing the game. You could see this as like corporate speak to try and, you know, say, honestly, we're looking out for you all, but I don't know. I kind of get it. I think someone as old guard as Aaron Forsyth is worth trusting with this kind of thing. He also talked about anecdotes of Aaron Forsyth playing Armageddon in his first Commander deck, because that's the kind of player that he is, because he's an old Pro Tour stalwart. And again, maybe it's just like relatable vice president of Wizards of the Coast, but it worked on me. I found that very relatable. And it speaks to that stuff I said in yesterday's video and previously, that a lot of the designers at Wizards of the Coast, whether they are in senior positions now or not, genuinely love this game. It was the game that started their career, continues to be their career, and has been a huge part of their lives. And for that reason, they are actually very good shepherds of the game, in spite of the occasional design mistake or hiccup in terms of banning Nardu, for example, quick enough, and things like that. So let's get on to the what they're doing, right? So we've got a bracket system, which I'm going to put on screen now. The bracket system is being brought to the format and hopefully by Vegas, which is the end of this month, which is kind of wild because that's very soon. This is a mock-up of the concept that they have put out to sort of give people an idea, where we have 4 categories or buckets, or they're calling them brackets, but I believe the power bracket name is still up in the air. In number 1 at the bottom, you have the low-powered stuff, Swords to Plowshares, Grave Titan. These are cards that are regularly in precons and they will regularly put them in precons again. Level 2 is the step up from that, powered up from there. Stuff like, in this case, we've got Fabricate, so tutors. Tutors don't often show up in the precons. And we have Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, a classic stacks piece that I love. And I was surprised to see that in category 2. Maybe pleasantly surprised, because this might even reduce the animosity people have towards stacks pieces like Thalia. Level 3 is the next power level up. Things like Dranith Magistrate is the example they gave here, and Personal Tutor. Personal Tutor being a much more powerful tutor than Fabricate, arguably. It's much cheaper, let's say. So efficient, more consistent cards. Dranith Magistrate completely turning things off, I guess, as opposed to just taxing you. And then number 4 is the highest power cards that only go in the highest power of decks. The example they give is Vampiric Tutor, one of the best tutors of all time, banned in Legacy currently, and Armageddon. Now, it's important to know that Armageddon was discussed extensively as a example example of what they're going to be putting in category 4 that is not the most powerful card. Armageddon is not a huge CDH staple, it is just a card that most people do not want to see in their games of Commander. And that if you want to buy into a game where that is absolutely okay, Armageddons and Blood Moons being the two examples that they gave in that sort of category, then you very much want to understand that you are in that specific bracket. The players in tier 3, 2, and 1 do not want to be getting Armageddoned. And I think that's a really clean way of actually looking at it. That although Armageddon is not the most powerful thing you can do in Commander, it is absolutely the thing you only want to see in the most cutthroat of matches. Places where people are buying into that kind of thing. So it goes into bucket or bracket 4. Personally, the numbers bug me a little bit because, I don't know, tier 1 seems like it'll be higher than tier 4, but these aren't tiers, they're brackets. The naming conventions are up in the air. I hope they kind of nail that down in a way that feels less confusing to me. So to clarify a little bit about these levels, these brackets, level 4 is the most powerful thing ever, but level 1 is the pre-con level. That doesn't mean that things aren't powerful. Sword of the Plowshares is the most efficient, or one of the most efficient white removal spells of all time that still sees play in Legacy to this day. So it's not powerful things, but it's things that, like, they expect new players and the average casual player to be absolutely happy to see in a game of Commander. I think having 4 sort of guideline lists of cards that fit into those sort of archetypes, or not even archetypes, those sub-formats or styles of play is a good thing. Exactly how we describe our decks, there was talk of how if you have a 4 bracket card in your deck, you are now playing a 4 bracket commander, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it does give us more tools, which I'll talk about shortly. More tools to discuss Rule Zero with our friends and our opponents and our newfound table mates, and that's good for me because I've always found Rule Zero to be clunky and kind of weird. And they talk about how this is not just a Wizards mandated thing, this will be a communal collection and lists and project, and they're going to have a committee or panel that will help support this with community members on it. That will obviously be members of the original rules committee, members of the command advisory group. Yeah, that's probably what it's mainly going to be formed up of, with maybe some new ones too. They mentioned explicitly that they were going to have a member that be from the CEDH community because they recognise that is a way that people want to play and they want this to facilitate that. When asked, will they have separate ban lists for CEDH and Commander, that was explicitly said to be no. Aaron Forsyth said that is not something they want to entertain. Instead, you have the bracket system to advise you where you should be. Now, there are some imperfections to the idea of the bracket system, where if you are a deck that is playing just one copy of a high-powered card, let's say Armageddon's a bad example. Let's say you're playing one copy. Let's say Ancient Tomb. I think they mentioned where they wanted to put that. I can't remember if it was 4 or not. It probably should be 4 in my opinion. But let's say you're playing Ancient Tomb to make your 6-mana commander more palatable and more playable, but your deck is wildly derpy and silly. Well, there's that argument that you're not really a bracket 4 deck, right? You're a bracket 2 or 3 deck playing one bracket 4 card. And that does allow you to have a more quantifiable and comparable conversation than the abstracts of, is this a 6, is this a 7? I said on Twitter this week, on Monday, when this first got thrown about, that this sounds like this is a 7 with extra steps. But I actually think this is the absolute evolution of this is a 7. But it's evolving into something that's actually mildly useful. I think the conversation about, are you a 6 for a 7 is quite literally useless. It's been absolutely diabolically bad, allowing people to assess power levels, because it's so subjective. Of course, what cards fit in where will be subjective too, and there will be a lot of criticism and examination of where these cards end up in their brackets and so on. And of course, there'll be cards that'll be left out and will be bracketed later and so on and so on. It's not a hard and fast rule that you have to play within your bracket. You can have this conversation with your friends and your opponents, but I think it gives an actual framework that is tangible. You can read it, you can see it, and you can discuss it. By God, does it open up an entire world for content and similar. I think it will actually be a framework that helps to facilitate the Rule Zero conversation. It's not replacing that, but Rule Zero conversations are often very awkward. At Command Fest, I struggle to really have them with players because when asking what kind of game do we want, people are like, well, this is my not so good this, and this is my quite good that, and what the fuck does not so good and quite good even mean? One person's quite good might be another person's absolutely terrible. And the point I've been coming to a lot in my thoughts about how the hell do we manage a format like Commander is that it's inherently broken and imbalanced, and balancing it is virtually impossible. So the current ban list is not fit for purpose. The new ban list with the additional 4 cards is pretty much not fit for purpose. And even though some people preferred it, the constant no bans, no changes over the last 5 years prior to the shake-up last Monday was also just not fit for purpose. Ultimately, having a list of cards that you a suggestion that you don't play those and cards like them is nice, but it's so difficult to actually apply that to a real world scenario with an ever-growing game that it's not functional anymore. Arguably, it wasn't functional in the first place. I think having a relatively small ban list of the most broken shit, and then everything else being put into this bracket system for people to discuss and disclose, is actually a great step forward. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I did, but the more I listened to them, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, perhaps this is how we go about giving people the tools and the language to have conversations with one another that isn't just abstract numbers or vague ideas of when their deck wins. I'm not a big fan of the my deck can win by turn 4 thing, because most decks can win by turn 4. And sometimes people exaggerate it, and some people put it. It's never worked for me. I do recommend perhaps listening to the whole video. I'll link it in the description. It is pretty informative, and it really did help me to put to bed some of the worries that I had. They mentioned Sol Ring too, and how Sol Ring is kind of a tier 0 or bracket 0, where it's just so ubiquitous and so part of the format identity that it just transcends these barriers and sits outside of this space. Some people are going to lose their minds about that, but I think you have to really put those bugbears to rest if you want to play Commander. Sol Ring is the Pandora's box that's been open long before you started playing. Trying to close it now is dumb. I feel incredibly optimistic moving forward, even if the 2 weeks leading to this kind of sucked complete ass. And not in a good way. I'm excited in some ways to see who ends up being part of the end format panel. I'm excited to see people disagree and agree and argue and wax lyrical about where cards should and shouldn't be, and how that informs the ongoing conversation around that. In many ways, it does the whole thing of not banning loads of random shit that doesn't need to be banned, or not enough stuff that needs to be banned, because it's kind of a heavy-handed or light touch, right? But it also gives you a framework to discuss how you just don't want to play with people that are playing Armageddon, or in my case, original Vorinclex at a casual table. I know some of you are watching this wanting me to rag on it, but I actually think this might be just what the fucking format needed. I've been Vince, also PleasantKenobi on the internet. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm sorry this video is so low effort, but my throat is still fucking killing me. I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.